Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Michael Brown Unplugged. I'm really glad to have you with me again. I want to talk, before Christian Toto gets in to do Hollywood and Toto, I wanted to talk for a minute about this shooting that occurred at the STEM School over in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. Since I talked about it yesterday, this shooting occurred on Tuesday. Yes, it occurred on Tuesday. Since then, a couple of events have occurred that I think are worth talking about. First and foremost is that there was a vigil held on Wednesday evening for the school body, for the students, for the parents, for the community, a vigil. Now, I don't know if what you think of as a vigil, but for me, a vigil, and in fact, this vigil kind of personified that in many ways, is a place where people gather. And they gather oftentimes in the evening. It can be at any time, but more often than not, they gather in the evening. And the purpose of the vigil is to provide solace to one another, to provide comfort, to give people a chance to talk, to hug, to cry, to reminisce. It's an opportunity for people emotionally to kind of gather those emotions, to let those emotions out, for everyone to share those emotions. The vigil that occurred on Wednesday night, the news reports show a candlelight vigil. It appeared to me to be in an auditorium, in a basketball court, maybe one of these basketball courts that is converted oftentimes to an auditorium. And many of the people there in the darkened room had lit candles. But the other thing that occurred, to me, that's a vigil. That is where people gather and they are comforting one another. There is solace. It's about peace. I mean, I know those of you who have listened to me over the years know that I'm pretty sarcastic. I'm pretty much a smart aleck. But I'm also a human being, and I recognize that people are suffering. I will confess to a tear in my eye when I saw the news reports of the parents of this young man, Kendrick Castilla, who had actually lunged at the shooter, took the shooter down, and in doing so lost his life. I was amazed at the composure of those parents. Likewise, I was amazed at the composure of one of the other students who had, as part of Kendrick Castilla's efforts to stop the shooting, he and a couple of other students had charged this dirtbag, and they were probably able, even though Kendrick lost his life, they were able to stop the shooter from doing any more harm. So the vigil is an opportunity for people to recognize the heroism of this young man, this hero, to recognize the heroism of the others who had stopped the shooter, and for them to focus on what is important. So let me ask you what is important. What is important are that families, friends, neighbors, that this community comes together and that they comfort one another. Now comes the Michael Brown that is the smarmy, snarky, smartass that you know me to be. I want to know what it is about this very sick propensity that we have, that whenever there is a crisis, that politicians descend like vultures on roadkill to make their presence known. If we as a society somehow feel this necessity to turn to politicians in order to comfort ourselves, then I would say that first and foremost, that is what is wrong with us. If we're turning to politicians at a vigil to provide some sort of words of comfort, there is really something wrong with us. Why aren't we turning to our pastors, our ministers, to our friends, to our family, to our neighbors, to our coworkers? Why aren't we turning to those people who actually have meaning in our lives as opposed to a bunch of, pardon my language, but a bunch of dumbass politicians that, but for the fact that it occurred in their district or in their state, have nothing to do with the community? They are our elected representatives that, for good or bad, we vote them in to represent us in Washington. We do not elect them to be the consolers, to be our ministers, to be our caregivers, to be our comforters. We do not elect them to do that. Now, I know that they are a part of, for those politicians, and right now I'm talking specifically about the accidental Senator Michael Bennett, the senior senator from the state of Colorado, and Jason Crow, a congressman from the 6th District of the state of Colorado. Now, I know that this school is in Jason Crow's congressional district, and I know that this school is in the state of Colorado, so this school is in the state that is represented by Michael Bennett in the United States Senate. But they show up at the vigil, and along with an anti-gun group, Moms Demand Action and others, immediately politicize and start talking about gun control at a vigil, where people are trying to, as best they can, understand that when God has given us free will, that sometimes bad things happen to good people. And if you don't get that reference, get on Amazon and find the book. I read the book decades ago. I don't even know if it's still in print. Why do bad things happen to good people? And bad things happen to good people because God has given us free will. But back to my point. And by the way, at the vigil, when the politicians and some of the anti-gun people began to talk, the students and the parents began to walk out of the auditorium. Hallelujah. Amen. So let's talk for a moment about this bizarre phenomenon that we tend to have of turning to politicians when something bad happens. Government should not be the center of our lives. And if government has become the center of our lives, there is something wrong with our society. The founding fathers never anticipated, never believed, never wanted that government would be the central force in a community, that government would be the central force in this great country. We have a national government that is supposed to be of limited and enumerated powers, meaning that they are not supposed to be in charge and not involved in every aspect of our lives. But if we look around, and I think this shooting, this tragedy, if we want to find some good in that tragedy, we have to look no further than Kendrick Castilla, the young man who helped take the shooter down along with the other two students. There's good in that. As much as the parents are suffering, they can be proud of their son for what he did, as can the parents of the other students. And then as a community gathers, the community can be proud. They can find the good in the community. So that when we go through our lives, in our busy daily lives of just constant go, 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 something as tragic as a shooting can cause us to stop and assess and take an inventory of everything that is good in our lives. Politicians, I do not consider to be a part of the good of our lives. They are a necessary evil. We have a social compact, and thank God, I mean literally thank God, that he gave the founding fathers the wisdom and the insight to give us self-governance. And so with that self-governance, we should recognize that it is you and me. And Michael Bennett and Jason Crow, shame on them for showing up at a vigil and talking about public policy. I don't even care if they were pro-gun or anti-gun, at a vigil that is not the place to discuss public policy. There is a time and a place. My gosh, I sound like a preacher today. Ecclesiastes. For every season. The purpose of this entire commentary, the past 12 minutes, I hope has just given you pause to stop and think, does the government play a central role in my life? And if the answer is yes, then I want you to reevaluate that. I want you to rethink that. I want you to reconsider whether or not the government should play a central role in our lives. The government should be in the position of defending this nation, securing our borders, providing the kind of representation that we, the people, choose. And they should not be showing up and advocating for or against any policy at a vigil where people are suffering. So shame on them. That's the first point. On to the second point. If I hear one more person talk about the epidemic of school shootings in this country, I am going to scream into this microphone. So please take notes. And in fact, I'll put this up on the Facebook page sometime today so that you can see these statistics. Both the local and the national media outlets are just running rampant with stories claiming that we are experiencing this epidemic of school shootings. I heard one commentator, bless his heart, I happened to be coming back and I'm dialing through the radio, listening to the radio programs. One individual talked about we should recognize that schools are probably the safe in a child's day. A school is probably the safest place a child is. When you think of all of the dangers in the home, chemicals, bathtubs, staircases, any number of things that can harm a child, school's probably the safest place. Think about the danger of just driving. But some of the commentators include a bunch of bogus statistics fed to them by the anti-gun organizations like Bloomberg's Everytown USA and the Gun Violence Archive. Those statistics that you have been hearing on the news that are false go like this. The United States has experienced 37 school shootings in 2018, and the STEM school shooting in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, marks the 10th school shooting incident in the United States so far this year. It's a lie. Abject lie. What they don't tell you is that these groups include in their count of so-called school shootings stupid things, like somebody shooting out a school window with a BB gun while the school was closed for Thanksgiving recess. Or they include something stupid like somebody getting shot in the school parking lot at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night as part of a drug deal gone bad, or something like an accidental discharge of a police officer's gun where there are no associated injuries with that accidental discharge. So, if you define a school shooting as an incident where somebody brought a gun into a school, K through 12, during normal school hours and intentionally fired it at another student or intentionally fired it at a teacher, how many actual school shooting incidents did we experience in this country in 2018, and how many so far this year? That's the question. Here's the answer. In 2018, there were 6, not 37, shooting incidents. The shooter was an ex-boyfriend who targeted his former girlfriend. 6. And in 2 of those 6 incidents, the shooter was an ex-boyfriend who was targeting his former girlfriend. 2019. The claim is that there have been 10. No. 2. Those 2, so far, in the first, how many days? Well, it's Friday, May 10. So January, February, March, April. So 4 months and 10 days. There have been 2. The STEM school shooting in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, and a shooting on April 1st in Prescott, Arkansas, where a 14-year-old boy shot a single targeted victim. So what are the odds of your child being in a school when a school shooting takes place? What are the odds? According to edreform.com, there are 129,189 K through 12 schools in the United States. If you assume that, similar to 2018, that there will be an average of 6, not 37, but 6 intentional school shootings in K through 12 schools again this year, that fraction, 6 over 129,189, equals 0.0046%, or put another way, 99.9954% of schools in this country did not experience a school shooting in 2018, nor are they expected to experience one in 2019. We do not understand risk, and we do not do risk analysis at all. 99.9954% of schools in this country will not experience a school shooting. Meanwhile, approximately 270 people per year in this country are struck by lightning, and about a third of them, 90, are school age. Yesterday, I'm driving back from a meeting in downtown Denver, and the Colorado Department of Transportation, as they are wont to do, put signs about distracted driving on the overheads along the interstates. And I don't remember the exact number, but so far in the state of Colorado, 146 people have been killed on Colorado highways. You are more likely to die on a Colorado highway than you are in a Colorado school. Where's the outrage? Where are the politicians? Where are the vigils? In the last 10 years, the highest number of K through 12 students killed or injured by intentional gunfire inside a school has been less than half that figure of people killed by lightning. So to put things in perspective, the chances of your student in a K through 12 school being killed or injured by gunfire inside a school is less than half the chance that they will be struck by lightning. You know, yesterday I talked about Professor Fox of Northeastern University and the study that he did about school shootings. Well, he adds some perspective to the claims that we are experiencing an epidemic of school shootings and that they are more common now than they were in the past. They're not. I'll tell you what is more common. What is more common is the willingness of the politicians to disrupt a vigil of grieving students and parents and neighbors and friends and relatives to talk about public policy. What is more common are news media, national and local, that are willing to spew out false statistics because they're too lazy and they're too stupid to do their homework. I know it's a pretty serious discussion for a Friday, but as you can tell, I'm pretty irritated. I'm irritated because I don't like people lying to me, and I don't like people intentionally lying to a mass audience that doesn't have the time or the wherewithal, the energy, the gumption, the initiative, whatever you want to call it, that do not have the time to do the research that myself, many of my listeners, Agent Jet A and others that do, so that I can bring you the facts. Last but not least, and we'll get Christian in here and have some fun. We'll have some fun, talk about the View. Last but not least, I want to say this to Michael Bennett and Jason Crow. If you want to debate gun policy, gun laws, have at it. But there is a time and there is a place to do that. And I would ask you this question. I think both of these students, at least according to some reports, stole these guns from their parents. So they possess the guns illegally. They enter a school with the gun, which is illegal. They shoot people, which is illegal. How much more illegal do we need? Maybe we're looking at the wrong problem. Maybe instead of looking at a weapon, maybe we ought to look at the breakdown of the family. Maybe we ought to look at mental health. Maybe we ought to look at any number of things that are wrong in American society, including you politicizing an event like a vigil. There's no way to do a good transition to Hollywood and Toto. So let me just do this. Let me take a deep breath. Let me take a sip of Diet Coke. Maybe I should have put some bourbon or something in it. And then let's bring on Christian Toto and have fun on a Friday. It's Hollywood and Toto time. Waiting for me to finish my tirades. So now it's time. To have the fun that we normally have on Fridays, which is Hollywood and Toto. So
I'm in the virtual green room.
The virtual green room. That's right. So you know what's great, and maybe at some point we'll start doing a video podcast or a video portion of Hollywood and Toto, because I know that people miss your mugshot. I don't know why they miss your mugshot.
And I can put my dog on camera, too, if that happens.
How is the dog?
The dog is spectacular. And my wife alternately says, I don't hate the dog, and I kind of like the dog.
Well, you put those two together. I don't hate the dog, and I like the dog. You can't ask for more than that. I'm
very content. That I couldn't ask for anything more, and it's the divorce has been at least postponed for the time being.
Postponed. Well, I'll try to do everything I can to make sure that I don't stir that back up.
Please do.
As we normally do on Fridays, you normally come in with, I shouldn't say normally, but more often than not, I think would be a better way to put it. You come in with a clip of some dumbassery that we can mock on The View. But you took a little different twist today.
Yeah, I thought let's focus on Meghan McCain because she's been making news this week. She was on Late Night with Seth Meyers, and it wasn't a traditional interview because she fought back a bit, which I don't think he rarely, if ever, happens on his show. But I thought what she said was rather interesting, and I thought that their exchange was definitely worth us breaking down because there's a lot of meat on this bone. Let's put it that way.
So do you want to go right into the clip?
Yeah, this is the two of them talking. They're going to talk about Representative Ilhan Omar. That's going to be the thrust of the conversation. But I think you can kind of get the gist of it just by hitting that play button.
But let me just add one thing for people who
Sure.
don't know who Ilhan Omar is. She's a Muslim congresswoman. I think she took, I can't remember, Keith Ellison's place from Minnesota, who's now the Attorney General of Minnesota. She's one of, I think, two Muslim congresswomen, or maybe two or three, and she has said some really stupid things about 9/11, for which she issued a ostensibly so-called an apology, and that kind of comes up in the interview too. But that's who Ilhan Omar is. So, without further ado, here's Meghan McCain and Seth Meyers.
And I just wonder, because I do think it's fairly dangerous, and you brought it up after Congresswoman Omar had also had some death threats against her. Do you think, she's obviously now stated she needs to be more careful with her language. Don't you think other people who talk about her need to be a little bit more thoughtful as well? Or do you stand by those comments of tying her to her rhetoric to the synagogue shooting?
I don't think I tied her to it in particular. I think that I'm calling out what I see as anti-Semitic language, and when you're talking about
But even after, you called it out after she'd apologized for it. I do want to establish the timeline.
I think that Democrats are hedging on this, and I think it's very dangerous. And I think Chuck Schumer and I are in alignment about Israel's stance in geopolitical politics. I think it's of the utmost importance. And
Can I pause for a moment?
It's your show.
Well, thank you. Do you think that Seth Meyers, when Meghan McCain uses the term that she and Chuck Schumer are aligned on this, and in terms of world, international geopolitics, how important Israel is to and she doesn't say this but implies, to the stability of the Middle East. Do you think Seth Meyers has a clue what she's talking about?
Seth Meyers has a bunch of talking points, which he's going to go running right through this entire conversation. He doesn't care, doesn't know, and hasn't had other thoughts in his head. And that's why this conversation is so prickly. And also, this whole notion that we need to be careful about what we say when we criticize politicians. When did that come into vogue? Because we've been criticizing politicians for ages, and people called President Trump a Nazi on a daily basis. Has anyone on this Late Night with Seth Meyers writing team said, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should be more careful? It is a BS line of defense, and it's completely transparent.
I don't think that you have kept up with the news, because there was a constitutional amendment to the First Amendment that says while Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or religion and the exercise thereof, there was an amendment that said, and that we the people are not entitled to criticize Congress because, after all, they're the ruling elite and we shouldn't criticize them. I think you missed that.
I must have missed it, but I've been offline for like 6 minutes, so I don't know how I missed it, but I did.
Okay, so I'm going to back this up only because we talk too, believe this or not, you and I talk too much. I want to go back and just remind people of, this is Meghan McCain with Seth Meyers.
Her rhetoric to the synagogue shooting.
I don't think I tied her to it in particular. I think that I'm calling out what I see as anti-Semitic language, and when you're talking about
But even after, you called it out after she'd apologized for it. I do want to establish the timeline.
I don't.
Yes.
She didn't fully apologize for it. She gave one of those hedge apologies, by the way. And notice how he's jumping in and saying, trying to save her before he needs to even save her further. Also, what about apologies? Since when do we accept apologies? Roseanne Barr apologized, and she's still off her ABC show. There are many, many people who apologize who the left does not forgive. But now, when Omar gives this half-hearted apology, it's all over. We're done. We have to forgive her. BS.
And not only that, but Congress passed this resolution about how we have to somehow oppose hate speech, but they didn't name her. It was just kind of this mamby-pamby resolution that says, yeah, we don't think people ought to engage in hate speech, but ignore the elephant in the room over here.
Yep.
It's insane.
Well, I think that Democrats are hedging on this, and I think it's very dangerous. And I think Chuck Schumer and I are in alignment about Israel's stance in geopolitical politics. I think it's of the utmost importance. And I think she is bringing her party to the extremism on this. And I think we have to look to Europe and what's happening over there, and that they're, in the British politics, anti-Semitism is very common. And I see it happening over there, and I worry about it happening over here. I stand by every single thing I've said.
Boom, I got to stop right there. She just gave example by example by example, and gave him no quarter to truly.
That's what she does. That's what she does best.
Right, she was good, and I stand by everything I said. What do you do at that point? Well, let's listen.
And if that makes me unpopular in this room or in front of you, so be it.
Bam. And if that makes me unpopular in this room or in front of you, well, that's the way it is.
And listen to the audience. Whisper quiet.
Whisper quiet. In this case, the audience is just, I don't know whether they're watching a train wreck, or they know they're watching a train wreck, or the audience manager that stands out, between the audience and the set to tell people when to applause, and they manage, or maybe they're just like sitting there like, we don't know what to do.
They're not used to this, so give them some slack here.
Yeah.
Don't. See, that's a weird thing that you would take the position of trying to be unpopular. Here I am trying to, find the common ground on this, because I do think I think we could both agree.
Were you bothered by her language about 9/11?
I thought it was taken out of context, and I think if you watch that whole
Would you
speech,
give President Trump the same leverage if he had said the same thing?
I think she meant, would you give President Trump the same leeway?
Okay.
So I think she misspoke, but the point's clear. So you think that Ilhan Omar's comments about, and some people did some things on 9/11, that comment was taken out of context. So we know what Trump speak is. Are you going to give him the same kind of leeway?
Yeah, and by the way, there is no context to make that sound better. That's just one of the talking points the left has embraced about those particular words. And Seth Meyers, on a nightly basis, is as divisive as humanly possible. And all of a sudden, he's going to try to bring us all together with Meghan McCain on the couch? That makes no sense.
Well, he wants to bring everybody together because Meghan McCain is on the couch.
That's right.
I mean, if Meghan McCain wasn't there, do you think they would be having this? Do you think he would be having this kind of conversation with, I don't know, pick whatever star is in the news right now? Do you think?
Heck no.
This conversation? No.
Nope.
I thought it was taken out of context, and I think if you watch that whole
Would you
speech,
give President Trump the same leverage if he had said the same thing?
it's an interesting thing when we have two Muslim women for the first time. They do have a different perspective on things.
Wait.
He played the people of color card.
He played the people.
He's losing badly, and he had to play it.
And he did what liberal speak does best. Oh, swerve away, take this exit, and don't answer the question.
If Adrian was there, she'd be saying, "Stop the fight."
And I think when we talk about the idea of let's all try to meet in the middle on things, we have to listen to other people's perspective. And
I agree. I work on The View with Joy Behar every day.
I'm sorry, I have to stop that. So here he is lecturing her about having to listen to everybody and listen to other sides. And this is the best comeback in the world, at least for you and me. Maybe for the rest of the world, it's not the greatest comeback in the world. But knowing what we do about The View, hey, I work every day with Joy Behar. I know what it is to listen and to try to find common ground.
This is the second best comeback. The first one's coming up. Trust me.
Oh, You're right. And in fact, let me back it up again. Modern technology allows me to do that.
When we talk about the idea of like, let's all try to meet in the middle on things, we have to listen to other people's perspective. And
I agree. I work on The View with Joy Behar every day. I just think you can't talk about Jews hypnotizing the world, talking about all about the Benjamins.
You keep bringing up the 2 tweets that she's apologized for, and I think that's a little unfair to her, especially because we've established...
Are you her publicist?
What?
Are you her press person?
Oh, this is why you and I don't watch. Well, first of all, because we're asleep when these shows come on. Let's just be honest. But this is why, even if we were 20 years old, we wouldn't be watching this.
This is he's playing the palace guard to the people in authority. It's embarrassing, and she calls him on it directly. I mean, think about their exchange up until now. It's defense, defense, spin, spin, defense. She's a person of color. She apologized, even though she didn't. It's amazing, and she really nails him with that one comment.
Are you her publicist? I also thought her litany, her whole explanation of all of the background about anti-Semitism and how that's, that really is truly a serious problem in Europe right now. And talking about, I have found common ground with someone like Chuck Schumer. And we both understand the geopolitical importance of Israel. I mean, once again, she came prepared.
Yep. And she's nimble, too. She can think on her feet.
Yes. And I think Seth Meyers is frantically looking at his notes, trying to figure out. Well, no, I take that back. I was going to say I think he's trying to figure out what to say. He's not. He's just sticking to his talking points.
And by the way, this is the unfair advantage that conservatives have. We live in a culture where we get the liberal talking points shown in our face constantly. It's in academia, it's in the media, it's in Hollywood. So we're ready for the rebuttals when they come because we've heard all these arguments. Seth Meyers hasn't heard any of these arguments. She might as well be speaking Klingon to him because he's never heard this stuff.
That's a great point because you and I have talked before about the bubble you and I tend to, and correct me if I'm wrong, we tend to talk about the bubble, and geographically we're talking about the bubble that really is Hollywood, that really is Los Angeles. But there's also a New York bubble. And isn't Seth Meyers recorded in New York?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so there's the New York bubble also of whoever those elites are, and they never get pushed back.
No. It's amazing. And, I wrote this on HollywoodandToto.com that when Stephen Colbert had Representative Omar on his show, after that, some people did something. I'm thinking, you're in a show in New York City. I passed by your studio. That's the heart of where people were savagely attacked and 3,000 people died. And you're going to let her sit there and not challenge her on that statement? How dare you? But again, Colbert is a hard partisan. Seth Meyers might even be more partisan than Colbert. And that's what they do.
And I know we beat this dead horse, but I have to say it. I'm just as concerned that in our pop culture, in our Hollywood culture, and Hollywood and Toto and what we talk about, I'm just as concerned about the Seth Meyers of the world as I am the people in the audience. And I cannot judge, and I'm not trying to judge everybody in the audience because there may be some people in the audience who understand exactly what's being said and understand what you and I mean, they would say exactly the same. They would say exactly the same thing that you and I say. Mm-hmm. So I really can't judge everybody, but I can say that I do fear for those that sit in the audience and for whatever reason, they just let it soak in.
Yeah, listen, you've got late night TV and Saturday Night Live that on a weekly, if not nightly basis, all they do is share one perspective, and they often make stuff up. And it goes unchallenged. There's no fact checking, and they can just do what they want and say what they want, and it gets out there to millions and millions of people. And I look at the political landscape and thinking, how does any Republican ever get elected? I mean, with all the headwinds against us, what could possibly help us win? It's staggering that a Trump will win from time to time.
Well, that's a great point because Republicans and conservatives do get elected. So there are people that, while they may watch Seth Meyers, they recognize it for what you and I recognize it to be, or there's still a vast not to become Spiro Agnew, but there is this silent majority out there that doesn't pay attention to this kind of crap.
Yeah, you couldn't pay me to watch these shows live. I'll watch the snippets and I'll do preparation for this segment. But other than that, I wouldn't go near Late Night with Seth Meyers. I have no interest in that show. And yet I don't think he's a dummy. I think he can be a bright performer, but the content is absolutely off-putting.
Yeah, well, you're right. So what else do you have for us today on this great Friday?
Okay. Did we talk about Long Shot at all, the new comedy, romantic comedy?
No.
Yeah, I want to mention it real briefly for two reasons. One, I want to say it tanked at the box office, but didn't do very well. It's been out in theaters for about a week now. It's Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron, and they are a very, very unlikely romantic couple. She plays the Secretary of State. She's running for the presidency. He plays a hard left journalist from who's trying to punch up her speeches, and they end up falling in love. And just two notes here. One, I think back in the day, Seth Rogen had some mainstream appeal. He was fun. He was goofy. He had that pot-smoking vibe about him. And I think his last few films, which is one thing that John Nolte noted at Breitbart.com, have fared very poorly at the box office, including this one. But also the film is very divisive. It's very left of center. It kind of pushes your face in it. And I think people who want to see a fun, charming, romantic comedy run into a Seth Rogen. They know how hard left he is, and maybe it scares away just enough people to make this film unsuccessful.
That's interesting because now that you've told me about the film, you've just saved me 50, 60 bucks because this is the kind of film, if it's as bad as you say it is, which I have no reason not to believe you because I actually, I depend on you to go to tell me what to see and not see. I would find it so, if it's that in your face and I go buy 2 adult tickets plus a couple of drinks and a giant bag of popcorn for Tamara, and suddenly all that's being thrown in my face, I'm more than willing to get up and walk out of the theater.
Yeah, but you've already spent your money.
Well, I've already spent my money, but I wonder, and I'm not going to do it with this film since you've already told me, but I think if I walked into a movie where I was expecting to really see something funny, what do you think if 15 minutes into the movie, I walked out, asked for the manager, and said, this movie is supposed to be a comedy, and it is so in my face, politically to the left, I want my money back. What do you think they'd do?
I think a smart manager would give your money back.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, not in every case. They might say, hey, you paid your money, you know what the deal is. But I think a smart manager who wants to improve customer relations, hey, I'm so sorry. I know the expectations were X, you got Y. Why don't you come back another time for a different movie? And by the way, I don't think this is a bad movie. I'd say it's a mediocre movie. I think these two stars are charming together. But the politics is just very aggressive, very in your face, and very one-sided, which is all the more funny because Seth Rogen has been talking it up like it's more expansive. It's more both sides can enjoy it. Well, that's not true. You can make a political series. I think House of Cards did a good job with that, where it wasn't hardcore left or right. It was just poking fun at the craziness inside the Beltway. I don't think that show took a definite stand, but this one does, and there are going to be consequences to that.
That's interesting. That's a great comment about House of Cards because while we know that Frank Underwood and Claire Underwood were ostensibly Democrats and were ostensibly liberal, that wasn't the focus of the show. The focus of the show were the characters. And the focus of the show was just how despicable some of these people inside the Beltway are. And so that wasn't the focus was the characters. And I think that's what made the show great. Because people who came up to me, knowing my experience in Washington, would ask me, are there really people like that? The answer is yes. That's why I enjoyed the show. That's why I enjoyed West Wing. I knew with West Wing, I knew that what I was getting was a liberal Democrat president, a liberal Democrat staff. But what was more fascinating to me was the accurate portrayal of kind of how all these people worked inside the Beltway.
Yeah, I think you made a great point. A lot of this is about expectations. I think the reason why people freaked out over the wardrobe malfunction with Janet Jackson years ago in the Super Bowl, because it's the halftime show. You want to be entertained. You want to hear music. You want to see some dancing. You don't want to see half of a breast in your face. That's not why you're there, and you're watching it with your entire family. When you go into the West Wing, there's no illusion about what the content is. It's a left-of-center show, and it was very well written and well produced. So you didn't get shocked by the fact that they were embracing a progressive cause, because that's what the show was about. But if you go to a Seth Rogen comedy, and it's called Long Shot, and it's about romance and yucks, and all of a sudden they're saying Fox News is sexist and evil, and Rupert Murdoch is the worst person in the world, then that takes you out of the moment. And if you're not aware of it, if you're not expecting it, it's not a good feeling.
And to your earlier point about a good manager would say, "I'm sorry, here's your money back." That's great, I do think that's what most managers would do. But rue the day that a manager says to me, "You knew what you were getting." No, I didn't. No, I was told this was a comedy. I was not told that this was some sort of political documentary guising as a comedy. So, no, I did not know what I was getting into.
Yeah, and if you watch the trailer for Long Shot, they don't play up all that information. It's just like this wacky comedy and these two different looking people. They connect, and how improbable and how goofy and how funny. And yes, you can tell there's some political stuff in the background, but that's not the focus. And they're very shrewd about that. I think it was Suburbicon, a movie from a year or two ago with George Clooney and Matt Damon. That was another movie that was sort of it had a very strong message or two. But if you watch the trailer, they hide it pretty well, because they know that's going to alienate people and the box office will be lower.
To me, that's fascinating. Okay, what else you got? Got anything else?
Yeah, Tom Arnold is back in the news, at least in in my news headlines.
I laugh when you say that name. What's he doing now?
Well, I don't know where this interview came from. There's a Twitter account called Truth Teller, and I don't know if they shot the video and put it up live, or they're just kind of copying it. Forgive me for not doing my due diligence on the source here, but they were the first one who shared it. So Tom Arnold is out somewhere, and he's talking to this younger man, and they're talking politics. And if you don't know, Tom Arnold may be the most Trump-deranged celebrity in all of Hollywood, and that's speaking volumes if you have followed this show any kind of length. And so they're talking about different topics, and at first Tom Arnold says he would vote for a Nazi over Trump. And, of course, that sounds terrible. So he says, well, Trump's the head Nazi, so if I vote for a lesser Nazi, it's not as bad. And then he says something about how Trump is performing a sexual act on Putin's private area, which is something we've heard time and again. And I'm thinking two things. One is, did you see the Mueller report where they said no collusion? And two, I thought those kind of jokes were verboten now. You can't tell them because they're kind of homophobic, right?
I would have thought so.
But then
what do I know about it?
I mean, and then I looked at a whole bunch of other people who have been using homophobic jokes in recent months, Chelsea Handler, Jimmy Kimmel, and I'm thinking, what do they have in common? Oh, they're all talking down to Donald Trump. So if you say something that's technically offensive, but it's attacking Donald Trump, you're good. You're good to go. So Tom Arnold's going to face zero blowback based on this, because his target is Trump. Had he said this about maybe Chuck Schumer or someone else, maybe Bernie Sanders, there could be some consequences. But right now, there's nothing.
This is why I like to have you on. Another fantastic point, because you articulate it a lot better than I do. They being that ubiquitous Hollywood, they are able to get by with that kind of thing that you and I could never get by with, or that, somebody on the right could never get by with. But they do, because they attach it to something derogatory about Trump. And when you make that attachment, it doesn't make any difference what the prelude was or the predicate was. It's the bottom line. And the bottom line is attacking Trump.
It's the get out of jail for free card. And you can spread it out liberally. I remember a few years ago when it was Romney-Ryan versus Obama and Biden. Jason Biggs, who's the comic actor from the American Pie franchise, seems like a funny guy. He sent out a series of tweets that were kind of sexualizing the wives of Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney. And it was pretty gross. And listen, a joke is a joke. And I kind of wish we could live in a time where we could just say what we want and people just kind of shrug their shoulders. But if those jokes were aimed at Michelle Obama and Jill Biden, that all heck would have broke loose. But he got away with it. And, I think I might have been working at Breitbart at the time. We kind of were, attacking that situation and saying how unfair it was a double standard, but he didn't suffer an ounce of consequence for doing those things. And it was a pretty disgusting thing. I think, from a cultural point of view, you can make fun of the president, you can make fun of a congresswoman, but their spouses are not in office, and they're usually off limits. And I think that's a very good thing. It should be something that we cling to. But if it's the wrong politician and the wrong party, they will attack, as they've done to Melania Trump for quite some time now.
All the norms have been thrown out. I mean, and let's be honest, to be objective, Trump has thrown out a lot of norms too.
Yes.
And in light of him throwing out norms, the left has thrown out norms. So we now live in this fascinating yet sometimes frustrating time of politics and culture where they intersect, where I don't think there are any norms. Go back to my point about you can make a homophobic comment or joke, and as long as that predicate is tied to something derogatory about Trump, you can get by with a homophobic predicate. It's open season for everything as long as it's tied to Trump.
Yeah. Listen, the norms will come roaring back if it's President Joe Biden in a year or two. If it's President Biden and you make jokes about Jill Biden, then you will face some significant consequence. I think that the powers that be in the media and the culture will roll back the norms, and all of a sudden the people who could have gotten away with it now will be in trouble then. So just that's going to happen too. But yeah, listen, I think if you're outraged by Trump shattering the norms, the reaction isn't to say, hey, hold my beer, I'm going to just double what you just said. That's not the reaction, because that just proves you're a phony, that you really didn't care about the norms. You care about the targets and you care about winning. And that's what we're seeing across Hollywood right now. Meryl Streep, when I don't know if it was after the election or what happened, but she was giving a speech, I think it was at the Golden Globes, and she said something about baring their fangs, talking about Trump and his antics. Right. And I actually wrote a column after that, maybe a year after that, thinking, no, Hollywood is baring their fangs right now with their nasty, incendiary rhetoric. And to me, it just proved that Meryl Streep was a hypocrite because she hasn't said a word about it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So before we go, I have to ask you, because you sent me an article that I had missed, but apparently, and at the beginning of today, just so you know, before you came in, at the beginning of the podcast, I talked about the STEM school shooting in Highlands Ranch. And some of the local media that was talking about, they were just giving some statistics that are just out and out lies. So I debunked a bunch of that. But in doing my research, I had not run across this story that you sent me from Breitbart, where apparently Chelsea Handler is already out blaming Republicans for the shooting.
There's nothing more ghoulish to me than watching celebrities fill up their Twitter accounts with these kind of comments, especially when we don't know anything about the tragedy. We just don't know the facts. And if you want to jump in and politicize a tragedy, I think that's just as bad as callous as can be. But that's what happens every time there's something like this going on in the news. So I want to read you her exact tweet. Now, Chelsea Handler is not a bright woman. She poses as an activist. I guess once upon a time she was kind of funny and button pushing, and she was kind of, hey, I drink and I have sex and I'm crazy. That was her shtick. Now she takes herself very seriously, and what comes out of her mouth and her Twitter account is not pleasant, it's not funny, and it's not that bright. So let me just read her quick comment after this particular shooting. How many children have to get killed for Republicans to do something about gun control? Thousands? Millions? Thank you for teaching our children that money from the NRA is more important than their lives. And all I can say right off the bat is these kids were underage. They weren't allowed to buy guns legally, and they had handguns. They weren't even the AK-47s that are often demonized. So she didn't have anything in the way of facts. She just wanted to demonize her opponent, but she's an activist, and we should really listen to her.
You should listen to her because it's pure, unadulterated dumbassery.
Yeah.
Oh, that tweet. Well, I think that tweet sums up why you and I do Hollywood and Toto right there.
Sad but true.
It is sad but true. Christian, thanks for joining us. It's been Hollywood and Toto. Happy Friday, everybody. Stay tuned. I have a few comments. Christian, thanks for coming on. I'll talk to you again next Friday, okay?
Sounds good.
For those of you who want to follow Christian, you can follow him on Twitter at HollywoodInToto.com, or you can always find him on his website, HollywoodInToto.com. I'm sorry, the Twitter feed is at Hollywood and Toto, and the website is hollywoodandtoto.com. Christian does a great job of writing articles about the intersection of politics and Hollywood, and I sincerely suggest that you subscribe to his newsletter, but get to his website, Hollywood and Toto, T-O-T-O, hollywoodandtoto.com, or follow him on Twitter, hollywoodandtoto.com. So thanks for listening to the Friday edition of Michael Brown Unplugged. I would appreciate it, as I always tell you, I would appreciate it if you would go to my website, michaelbrowntoday.com, michaelbrowntoday.com, and you'll see the button for Spreaker over there where you can subscribe to the podcast. The numbers continue to grow, and I want to say thank you to all of you that are doing that. And while you're at michaelbrowntoday.com, you will see across the bottom all of the places where you can follow or join me on social media. I would appreciate you subscribing to the YouTube channel, which you can find with the little YouTube icon. I would appreciate you following me on Facebook. Again, that icon is on michaelbrowntoday.com. And by the way, on Facebook, on my Facebook page, I have set up an internal discussion group. So if you would like to join that group, just put a request in, and unless you're a troll, you're going to get accepted into that discussion group. And then follow me on Twitter at Michael Brown USA. Follow me on Instagram. Make a request to join me on LinkedIn. But you will find all of that at michaelbrowntoday.com. So everybody have a great weekend. I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate you listening to the podcast, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.